The 9.7-inch iPad Pro came out today, March 31st. I'll be getting one maybe next week or the week after, and we'll be able to give you full hands-on, full review, and give you my thoughts on whether this is a worthy upgrade, whether you should buy it, whether it's the best iPad on the market. But before that happens, I want to give you guys 10 things that you need to know about the 9.7-inch iPad Pro before anything else. So the first thing, and these are in no particular order, but the first thing is the display. This is one of the best displays on an iPad. In fact, it's the best display. It's the same Retina resolution as the iPad Air 2, but some of the display tech that goes into it is borrowed from the bigger iPad Pro and is also brand new. So two of the things that make it the best display on any iPad are the True Tone display. What this basically does is it uses ambient light sensors to detect the background light and then adjust the color gamut on the iPad, so in whatever environment you're looking at, the display matches. It's something that you see with paper because paper is reflecting the ambient light in the room, and now the iPad adjusts for it. The other big thing that videographers and photographers will really like, the color gamut is expanded to the P3 color gamut, which is really quite solid. Number two thing to keep in mind, transfer speeds. On the bigger iPad Pro, you had USB 3 throughput. So if you used an adapter that allowed you to connect the iPad to, say, your memory card or your camera to transfer big files, on the big iPad, the iPad Pro 12.9-inch version, that was USB 3 transfer speeds. On the smaller version, they're only USB 2 transfer speeds. Number three, unlike the bigger iPad Pro, this device has 2 GB of RAM instead of 4 GB of RAM. The preliminary reviews that I've read have stated and suggested that there really is no big difference in terms of the day-to-day use cases, but it is something to note that it has half the RAM of the bigger device. Number four, again compared to the 12.9-inch device, they both have A9X CPUs, but the 9.7-inch model is actually clocked slightly slower than the big version. Again, with this and the RAM that we talked about before, early reviews suggest that performance-wise there really is no difference, but from a tech spec perspective, something that Apple doesn't really want you to know, there is differences between the performance chipset that you have in the bigger version versus the older version. Number five, the 9.7-inch iPad Pro does have a Touch ID sensor similar to other iPad devices, but unlike, say, the iPhone 6s, this is not the new second generation version. It is the original version, so it's going to be a little bit slower than the Touch ID sensor that people are using on the 6s right now. Number six, 4 stereo speakers. This again is basically the same thing as the 12.9-inch model. A lot of there was a significant amount of carryover between the 12.9 and the 9.7-inch iPad Pros. This is just something to note because it's really loud, it sounds really, really good, and depending on how you rotate it, that is in software modifies what type of sounds and what frequencies are coming out of which speakers. So it's just a very unique feature and something that's going to make music listening significantly better than, say, the third generation iPad that I have or even the iPad Air 2. Number seven, the camera module on this iPad is the best that there's ever been in an iPad, better than the 12.9-inch bigger brother. So it's the 12 megapixel sensor with 4K video recording, live photos, the same basic module that's in the 6S. But the big thing here, and I've talked about this on Twitter in several tweets, there's actually a little camera hump on the back, just like the 6 and 6S have with this particular camera module. So that's something to note because I think it's, pretty ugly. Just saying. Number 8, unlike the Air 2 and the 12.9-inch Pro, the other camera system, the FaceTime system, was actually updated. So this has, again, like the iPhone 6s, a 5 megapixel FaceTime HD camera, which will be great for certainly taking selfies, but more important to me is really video chat at higher resolution. These last two things are pretty important, I think. Number 9, the expense of this. This is the most expensive starting entry point for a 9.7-inch iPad ever. It starts at $599 compared to $499 in previous generations. Apple, since the beginning, has started the iPad line at $499 and no longer does that. Certainly the iPad Air 2, you can still now get it at an entry price of $399, but this is still the most expensive iPad 9.7-inch that there ever has been. For comparison purposes, if you look at an 128 gigabyte iPad Pro with the keyboard attachment, that's an extra charge, it brings it to about $900. If you compare that to Apple's MacBook Air line, the 11-inch model for the MacBook Air that also has 128 gigabytes of storage comes in at about the same price. So if you're thinking about using this as a laptop replacement, you really should make sure you see the reviews and understand what iOS 9 has to offer, because certainly it is not as robust of a multitasking operating system as macOS 10. But to get a model that's comparable as a laptop replacement, you're going to be spending about the same price. So that's something that you should definitely keep in mind. And the last thing, again, this is something that Apple hasn't really talked about, but the early reviews have suggested, and kind of makes sense just based on the tech specs that you have in this. But the battery life is actually not as good as the 12.9-inch Pro or the iPad Air 2. In some reviews that I've read, it's a 1 to 2 hours less on the Pro, 12.9-inch, and Air 2 respectively. So you're going to still see about 9.5 to 10 hours of battery life, which is still good, but it's not as robust as the previous high-end offerings from Apple in terms of battery life. So again, those are just 10 things you should know about the iPad Pro. In the future, I'm going to be getting my hands on an iPad Pro, and I'll be able to give you, my review on how good is this as a tablet, is this the best iPad available, is this a good laptop replacement, etc. But that, again, is just 10 things to know about the iPad Pro. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to click subscribe below to stay up to date on the latest and greatest videos from my channel.